I feel like we're being drowned in lies. Tate sells false hope, Paul pushed empty NFT promises, and Peterson twists logic to turn ideas into enemies. The internet is full of influencers ready to take advantage of you.
Back in my day, we just called these guys sophists.
A poorly cut out PNG of Plato? What are you doing here?
Let's head to Athens. Some perspective might help.
What happened? Why am I a PNG now? Where are we?
Welcome to Athens, where everybody's got something to say, but not everyone's got something worth hearing.
Wait, aren't you going to acknowledge the fact that you just kidnapped me?
See that guy? He's a sophist. A master at twisting words to make anything sound convincing. Sophists like him weren't interested in what's true, just in what would get them the most followers and, of course, the most money. Sound familiar? They'd have thrived on Twitter. I tangled with sophists plenty in my day. In dialogues like Gorgias and Protagoras, I showed how they use clever language to win arguments, not to uncover any real truth. For them, it was just about winning, no matter the cost. Now, my student Aristotle took a different approach. He broke down persuasion into three key elements: ethos, pathos, and logos, each with a purpose. Alright, let's clear this up. Ethos is about character, your credibility. It's how you convince your audience that you're worth listening to. It's not just about what you say, but who you are and how you present yourself. Pathos is about connecting emotionally, making people feel something. And logos, that's the logical appeal, using facts and evidence to make your case. Thanks, Aristotle.
Why do you guys sound identical?
Alright, I've done enough guiding. Time for you to stop being a leech and get to work. Let's see if you can figure out what your modern sophists are up to.
Look, I've got my body back. Jeez, the man kidnaps me, lectures me, puts me to work, and then just disappears? Anyway, let's start with Tate. Andrew Tate presents himself as a messiah for young men, promising to help them escape the Matrix and achieve success beyond their wildest dreams. He sells courses, where he claims to teach the secrets to becoming rich and powerful. But let's take a closer look at his methods. Tate's got a way of really connecting with guys who feel stuck or frustrated with their lives. He's not just selling a course, he's selling the dream of breaking free and taking control. The phrases he uses like escape the matrix and amass wealth aren't just catchy, they're powerful because they're built to target people that are in a bad spot already. But that's where the magic of his rhetoric lies. He taps into deep-seated emotions of inadequacy and the desire for something more, making his pitch almost irresistible.
Classic pathos. He's tugging at their emotions, sure, but is it actually helping anyone?
Oh, of course you came back. Did you get nostalgic about criticizing sophists?
Old habits die hard. Now, where were we?
Anyway, here's where things start to fall apart. A lot of people who signed up for Tate's Hustlers University program quickly realized it wasn't living up to the hype. Many users reported that the course content was disappointingly basic, covering topics that could be easily found online for free with little research. The curriculum was often described as disorganized and superficial, offering advice that feels more like common sense than groundbreaking insights. And it gets worse. The real money-making scheme behind Tate's course probably isn't the actual content, but the affiliate marketing program behind it. Members are encouraged to recruit others into the program, earning commissions from their signups. This has led to accusations that Tate's operation is more of a multi-level marketing scheme than an educational course, with some critics even going so far as to call it a scam. So that dream of breaking free? It starts to look a lot like a sales pitch when you realize who's really benefiting. Tate's pathos-driven appeal pulls people in, but the results usually don't deliver. For a lot of people, the empowerment he promises stays out of reach, while Tate keeps raking in the profits from their subscriptions.
Real empowerment isn't a quick online purchase. It's not coming from a guy making bank of your insecurities.
Exactly, but what happens when someone uses trust instead of fear to cash in. That's where Logan Paul comes in. Before we head into Logan Paul's alleged scam, consider subscribing, it helps me keep going. Logan's been through it all, infamous for his controversies, especially the time he filmed a video in Japan's not-so YouTube-friendly forest. That move nearly tanked his career. But somehow, Paul managed to flip the script. He reinvented himself as this more mature, reflective guy, launching a successful podcast called Impulsive and shifting into a new lane. With his rebranding in full swing, Paul decided to dive into the NFT craze with a project called CryptoZoo. The idea behind CryptoZoo was to create a blockchain-based game where users could buy, sell, and breed exotic animals that were represented as NFTs. Each animal was supposed to be a unique, hand-drawn piece of digital art, promising both investment potential and fun. And with his reputation seemingly restored, investors and fans alike couldn't wait to jump in. That's ethos at work. People bought in because of who he was or who they thought he'd become. But trust, you gotta earn that with every step. That's right, and when that trust starts to crack, everything can fall apart. Fast. Just look at what happened with CryptoZoo. Apparently, CryptoZoo was a mess from the get-go. The game wasn't what people expected. Those unique, hand-drawn NFTs? Yeah, they never showed up. And the game itself was practically non-existent. It didn't take long for investors to realize they were holding NFTs that were pretty much worthless. And then, CoffeeZilla came in with a bombshell of an investigation, calling the whole thing a scam. Paul's reputation took a major hit when it turned out CryptoZoo might have been what's called a rug pull, where developers hype up a project, cash in, and then bail, leaving everyone else in the dust. Paul promised 1.8 million in refunds, but there's still a lot of people waiting to see that money. So people bought into Paul's comeback because they trusted his new image, but when CryptoZoo crashed and burned, that trust fell apart. He built up his reputation after past mistakes, but with this fiasco, it's clear that relying on this ethos wasn't the best bet. But hey, don't lose sleep over Logan, he's still rolling in cash thanks to Prime, so he'll be just fine. Now while Logan's busy stacking cash, there's someone else that's been stacking influence, Jordan Peterson. But Peterson's approach is a bit different. Tate and Logan relied on emotions and reputation, pathos and ethos, but Peterson leans heavily on logos, or logical arguments, and logos, well, it's a bit trickier. It's not as obvious as emotions or credibility, so we'll need to dig deeper to really get what he's doing and whatever his logic actually holds up. Jordan Peterson started out as a respected psychologist at the University of Toronto. Back in 1999, he wrote a book called Maps of Meaning, which looked at how myths shaped our views of the world. He was also known for his logical approach to understanding human behavior, but in 2016, everything changed. Peterson publicly opposed Canada's Bill C-16, claiming it would force people to use gender-neutral pronouns, a move he saw as a serious threat to his free speech. This threw him in the spotlight, but many people thought he was blowing things out of proportion. As Peterson got more attention, he started shifting his focus from psychology to culture wars. He began arguing that academia and progressive politics were increasingly advocating for identity politics, focusing on group identities like race, gender, and sexual orientation. He tied this to what he calls postmodern neo-Marxism. Wow, that's a mouthful. So in Peterson's view, postmodernism and Marxism have teamed up to push identity-based politics. Here's why he sees this as a big deal. Postmodernism questions the idea of objective truth, which Peterson thinks is the cornerstone of Western thought. Without a shared sense of truth, it's tough to defend principles like free speech and individual rights. Marxism prioritizes group identity over individualism, which Peterson believes can lead to authoritarian regimes that crack down on personal freedoms. Peterson sees postmodern neo-Marxism, say that 3 times fast, as a mix of postmodernism and Marxism that gets people to focus more on their group, whether that's race, gender, or class, instead of seeing themselves as individuals. He thinks that when people start focusing too much on group identity, they end up feeling like victims and blaming society for their problems instead of taking on responsibility. In his view, this victim mentality leads people to demand special treatment or justice for their group, pushing for changes that put their group's needs over individual rights. And here's where it gets tricky. Peterson believes that once group needs take over, those in power might start enforcing these demands by shutting down anyone who disagrees or questions the dominant narrative. That's how he sees this leading to authoritarian policies.
Turning logic into fear? That's a clever trick. It sounds rational, but all it does is stir up trouble.
Right, fear makes things murkier instead of clearer. But to Peterson, these ideas are a real threat. But critics think Peterson's postmodern neo-Marxism idea is way off. They say he's basically created a boogeyman by mashing together two very different philosophies that don't really belong together. Let's break it down. Postmodernism is all about questioning big, overarching stories and doubting universal truths. It's skeptical of the idea that any one narrative can explain the world, and it often even questions the concept of objective reality. Marxism is kind of the opposite. It's centered on this grand narrative that class struggle drives history. It's all about material conditions and economic power, and it's focused on finding one big explanation for social and economic inequalities. Critics argue that these two philosophies don't really mix. Postmodernism's distrust of any grand narrative doesn't mesh well with Marxism's insistence on one big story about class struggle. By trying to combine these conflicting ideas, Peterson ends up creating a broad, catch-all enemy that oversimplifies both. Basically, critics think he's lumping together a bunch of ideas that don't naturally fit, just to create an easy target.
Mixing oil and water? That's not a foundation, it's just a mess waiting to happen.
And that mess? Critics say it's more than just confusing, it's actually dangerous. They argue that Peterson's framing distracts from real conversations about social justice by turning it into a fight against an enemy that might not even exist. So what's Peterson really up to? Critics think Peterson isn't using his logic to clarify or educate. Instead, he's using it to stir up fear and division. As Peterson kept pushing these ideas, his influence started spreading beyond the academic world. This is where things really started to change. After the Bill C-16 controversy, Peterson published 12 Rules for Life in 2018, which was a massive hit. This boosted his influence even more, but as he got deeper into cultural commentary, he started aligning with far-right figures and platforms. In 2022, he teamed up with Ben Shapiro's The Daily Wire, a media company known for its conservative, often provocative content aimed at pushing back against what they see as left-wing bias. This marked a big shift for Peterson, from a respected academic in psychology to a polarizing figure diving into ideological battles outside his field. But as he moved further from his expertise, the cracks in his arguments started to show, and when you break them down, it becomes obvious just how weak his logic has become. So that's Tate, Paul, and Peterson broken down, exposed. I've taken on some pretty big names, right? What do you think, Plato?
Congrats, you just made a video essay about 3 internet personalities. Bravo. But let's be real, you've barely scratched the surface. The internet's full of people doing the same thing.
So are you gonna stick around and help me deal with this mess?
Deal with it? Nah, I'm heading back to Athens to chill with some twinks. You're on your own. Bye.
So who's up for tackling the rest of the internet? Anyone? No? Cool. Hey, check out my other video about Alexander the Great's downfall. You probably know him as a great conqueror, but apparently he had a massive drinking problem.